Again, thank you all for being here. We would like to ask Dr. Dean Busby, former director of the School of Family Life, and a colleague of Dr. Sandberg's, to do a brief introduction, and then we'll proceed to the main event. Dr. Sandberg will provide a lecture to us on secure attachments, the key to a happy, healthy, and passionate marriage.
So it's a pleasure to introduce Dr. Sandberg. This is an important year for him. It's his 20th year in academics. So he started in 1998 at Syracuse University and came here in 2008 and is completing his 10th year. Most of you who know Jonathan know that he's very passionate about multicultural families and research. And combined with his 10 years here and his time as an undergraduate student now, I think he's lived in Utah longer than any other place in the world. So now he's got to call himself the Utah, which for a person that appreciates diversity is a little bit of chagrin. In fact, I think he was born in Mexico. You're Mexican, right?
My brother.
Oh, I was going to say, with Trump in the White House, he's going to be looking over his shoulder. But anyway, you have in the program some details about some of the things he's published, so I won't go over those in detail. But one of the things that impresses you when you get to know Jonathan is how widely successful he is in terms of the different areas of responsibility. Many faculty are good at one thing. Maybe they teach well or they're a good scholar. Jonathan does everything very well. He's a fantastic scholar. You look at his publications in his field. He's one of the top scholars in family therapy. He's a fantastic teacher. He's won numerous awards for his teaching. He gets great student evaluations every year, and he teaches hard classes that typically stretch students to grow in ways they're not particularly interested in growing sometimes. So there are challenging classes to teach. He's a fantastic administrator. In fact, his accomplishments in the scholarly area are particularly noteworthy because about half of his 20 years he's been running some kind of program doing administrative work. And usually administrators don't get a lot of scholarship done, but Jonathan, Dr. Sandberg has consistently been able to do high-quality research and be an administrator. And he's a great clinician as well. So without more, well, I will say that, of course, his greatest accomplishment is his family. Had the privilege of vacationing a little bit with him, and what a hoot they are to be with. And you really get to experience secure attachment and see it in action. His wife Sharon and he have been married for I don't know how many years now, 26 years, and they have 4 wonderful children. So it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Jonathan Sandberg as an excellent example of the Virginia Cutler ideals.
It's nice to be with you tonight. I hope we can get enough volume out of this. And there's lots of seats still. Can we have people that are, if you have empty seats in your row, can you move to the outside and leave the, or move to the inside and leave the outside seats available? That would be great. Thank you. With this many friends and family here, I'd much rather karaoke. And if you have been to our house, that would be the first thing we'd be doing tonight. I also want you to know that as I sat down, one of my daughters immediately said, "Exactly how long is this?" So the other daughter already said, "Why would I go to hear another lecture?" So just so you know, I'm planning on talking for 50 minutes. Word on the street, extra credit goes to the students after 40 minutes. So set your timers right now, and you'll be in great shape. I'm going to try to talk just a little theory about attachment, and then talk about some practical applications, then some research, and then we'll talk about our own lives, okay? And I hope that I won't bore you. What I've learned about attachment has changed my life. It's changed the way I talk to people. It's changed the way I listen to people. It's changed the way, most of all, I see what people need. And when I interact with them and I see a behavior that seems weird or hurtful or inappropriate, When I look at it through an attachment lens, I can understand that they're trying to be heard and seen and loved. And so the greatest gift I believe we can give each other is to really do that, to really see and hear and love people. So this, what we're talking about tonight is very personal for me. I got my clicker here somewhere. Can you hear me okay? Okay. The Harvard Grant Study is a study that they followed some young men, some boys even, in the Boston area, some inner city boys, some boys that ended up going to Harvard for up to 75 years. And George Valiant was kind of the last study project manager who resurrected it. And he made this great observation. They found the people that were happiest across the lifetime were not the people who drank the less, who had the most successful job. They were the people that could report the most love. And he said, then the greatest challenge we have is finding a way of coping with life that doesn't push love away. And so what happens so often is when we feel we're being rejected or we're afraid we'll be rejected, we do things that pushes love away, which kind of cements the thing we're most afraid of, which is isolation. So let's talk a little bit about that. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth Salter are kind of the originators of attachment theory. We could talk about that a lot. I'm just going to give you 5 principles. This need to be loved and seen and heard is hardwired. It's deep in the brain. It's universal, cross cultures. I think there's something like 120 international studies of attachment in childhood. And the principles hold up across cultures. What people are looking for is a safe haven and a secure base. I have a little nest in my office from the play therapy room, and in it are some birds. And I like to think of a safe haven as a nest. When there's a storm, it's somewhere you can go. It's somewhere you can go to find respite. A secure base is what you launch from to go do really amazing, courageous things. When I was a teenager, we went to Florida and we saw Cape Canaveral, and they were going to launch the space shuttle. And they showed us the launching pad, 21 feet thick cement. To launch, to withhold the pressure, the heat that would occur at a launch, they had to have a really secure base. So we all want a safe haven and a secure base. That's what we're looking for. Bowlby and Ainsworth said that there are 2 behaviors that determine whether or not a relationship is safe. First, are you accessible to me? Can I find you? And second, when I reach out to you, will you respond to me? Those are the behaviors they say most determine safe and secure attachment. We need to also remember that to be isolated is traumatizing. I'll let Sue Johnson say more about that later. We're having some glitches here with my slides. So my 5 is gone and my 3 is there twice, but that's okay. We'll work with that. When we have a threat of isolation, we have predictable responses. You can predict it. First, there'll be a little protest. That might look like somebody yelling or screaming, right? Then you might have a little despair, maybe some pouting and some withdrawal. Then someone might sink into some depression. And then in the end, they do this defensive detachment. They separate themselves from the person who might reject them. You see that over and over and over again in children and adults. It is an adaptive behavior if it gets the other person to engage again. It's a maladaptive behavior if it causes the other person to reject you. And again, what we want is we want people to love us. We want people to look after us. Bowlby said it was cradle to the grave, from infancy to adulthood, to death, actually. And we'll highlight mostly couple-based attachment today, but I want to show a video clip if it'll let me. Having a little trouble with the slides here.
Okay, and I'm going to present a little bit of it to you, but we could talk about this all afternoon. All right. So, what is attachment in a nutshell? Piglet sidled up to Pooh from behind. Pooh, he whispered. Yes, Piglet? Nothing, said Piglet, taking Pooh's paw. I just wanted to be sure of you. That's about attachment. That's an attachment moment. An attachment moment is when one human being reaches out to another and says, are you there? Do I matter to you? Do you value me? Will you respond to me if I need you? If the answer is no, okay, we are absolutely, John Bowlby says, wired by evolution to respond with alarm. Okay? Isolation is inherently traumatizing. That's why we call isolation in our criminal system cruel and unusual punishment. Yeah? Okay, I'm going to give you an image from the trauma book. For example, the Celtic people had a very dark view of life. They saw life as the fact that in life what you do is you stand in a dark, narrow passageway with your back against a wall while a dragon comes for you. There is no way out, and you will lose the fight. That's given. We all die. So what is the point then? The point is how well you fight. Attachment theory says there's another piece. The piece is, do you stand alone in the dark while the dragon comes to you, or is there someone standing beside you? If there's someone standing beside you, that makes all the difference.
So she says, if I call to you, will you respond to me? Do I matter to you? Those are the questions we're asking. Another way to think about it is, there are two fundamental questions each of us ask early in childhood and we ask throughout our lives. The first is, am I lovable? Am I worth loving? Am I worth your love? And the second is, can I trust you to provide love? Now, who provides that to us when we're very young? Our parents, hopefully, or our grandparents, or our caregivers, right? And if the answer will be either yes or no to each of those questions. And if the answer is yes, I think I'm lovable, and yes, I can trust you, then you develop a secure attachment style. Research shows that 60 to 80% of kids around the world develop a secure attachment style. But if I believe I'm lovable, but I'm not quite sure that you'll love me. For example, I have teachers, grandparents, people at church, maybe that tell me I'm good, but I watch you and you're inconsistent or harsh or abusive in your approach to me. Maybe you have a substance abuse problem, maybe you have a mental illness problem. Then you'll develop what's called an avoidant style. An avoidant style says, you know what, it's probably better for right now that I don't reach out to you and consistently be rejected. And by the way, if you haven't been a parent, you will hurt your kids in those ways. That's just inevitable. You can't respond to all the demands of life. But if we consistently respond in that way, then kids will develop an avoidant style. In the couples literature, they call this a withdrawer. In the moments of tense conflict in marriage, they choose to withdraw. Okay? But if I see you acting trustworthy with other people, I see you loving other people, I know you can do it, but you don't seem to give that love to me, or I can't seem to earn it, then you develop an anxious style. An anxious style is where someone would consistently try to up their behavior to get approval. For a kid, it would be, did you see my test? Did you see this drawing I did for you? Did you see this thing I cleaned up? They want that love, validation, and attention. Anxious folks knock at the door 5 seconds again later, knock at the door louder 5 seconds later, and you want to open the door and say, I'm coming, right, in a loud voice. Withdrawers find a way to make it to their man or woman cave. They can do it stealthily, they do it regularly, you can't find them. So just by a show of hands, when you're feeling insecure, how many of you know, yeah, I probably withdraw, I'm probably an avoidant type? Okay, how many of you say, I kind of get anxious, I pursue, I go after people, I can make a fuss? Okay. These are adaptive styles. These are things you do to regulate closeness. These are things you do to try to get people to be close. I'll just give you an example from my life. We're a normal family. When I was just about 2 years old, my little sister died in her sleep. And about 10 months later, my mom's mom and her brother were killed on the way to the MTC, and the other brother was left in a coma. That was a period of time where I think it was hard for my folks to be available. I don't have any hard feelings about that. That's just life. That's what happens. Sometimes parents die. Sometimes people are unemployed. So these adaptive strategies we develop in relationships to make sure we manage our hurt. Or at least we can figure out how safe is it to be close. Okay? Then there are, unfortunately, folks who grow up in an experience that's very traumatic. The answer is clearly no to both, and they develop a trauma response. And they usually are trying to draw people in until people get close enough and then push them away. And so it's this kind of push me, pull you, and it's very confusing if you're trying to interact with them. They desperately want closeness, but if you get too close, you're going to hurt them. So they have to push you away. Okay? So that's kind of the typology. I'll give you an example of what it looks like in a parent-child, in an infant-parent relationship.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby, who's about a year of age.
I'm my good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
So it's not an exaggeration to say that disconnect is distressing. It's traumatizing. You saw it with the baby. Now, how long did it take the baby and the mother to reconnect? Very quickly. That is probably a sign of what? A secure attachment, right? We're going to talk about repair at the end, but I want to make this really clear. What Ed Tronick said is true. Disconnect is not our enemy. The good is when we're getting along. The bad in life is when we're disconnected. The ugly is when there's no chance for repair. That's where the ugly lies. And healthy couples, they repair. They repair a lot, and they repair quickly. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Couple level attachment is different in a couple ways. It's a horizontal relationship. It's not a vertical relationship. In a vertical relationship, one person has responsibility for the other. The person who's one down in a position of power does not have the responsibility to give something back. A horizontal relationship is a reciprocal relationship. The responsibilities are shared. I owe something to Sharon, Sharon owes something to me. We need to take care of each other. One of the hardest things to explain in therapy is damages of a vertical nature, parent-child, can't be repaired horizontally. So we can talk more about that later if we were doing a clinical presentation, but that's one of the reasons it's important for people to figure out where they are with God, because that's another vertical relationship that can help overcome the damage of your own parent-child relationship. Fear and uncertainty are traumatizing to adults as well. We showed a clip for you, for those of you that were here earlier, about a guy at a Bulls game who was on the phone. The kiss cam was going around. 3 times the kiss cam came to them. He wouldn't even look at his wife. She's pounding on his shoulder. They're being embarrassed in front of everyone. The Bulls mascot comes, pours a beer on his head, picks up his wife, and takes her to the exit. She's distressed because he's not responding. Think about your own relationships that you have, even with peers or roommates. What happens when people don't respond? The same kind of protest, clinging, defensive detachment. That stuff happens in all relationships. It matters to us as adults as well. And there's an additional component. By the way, the only thing that was taken out of the interaction with the mother and the baby was the responsiveness. She was available, she was accessible, she just didn't respond. In a couple relationship, the accessibility and responsiveness leads to this engagement, this mutually satisfying attachment need meeting in connected interaction. And we'll talk a lot more about that. That's a unique part of the couple relationship. This is the struggle we have today. We live in a world where people value not being hurt more than they value deep connection. The chance that I might get hurt in a romantic relationship with someone, avoiding that is more important than the risk that I might be really happy and connected. And I'll just show you a quote from C.S. Lewis and a cartoon somebody made to it that helps me explain this. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything in your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. Garth Brooks has a song about this called Standing Outside the Fire. We call people strong and courageous who don't have to connect to others, who don't need others. Where there is no risk, there is no intimacy. Intimacy means closeness. It's not just the Mormon word for sex. Okay? Intimacy means closeness. And I know that I need a new word for Mormon. I just haven't come up with one yet. Maybe you can help me out afterwards. But it's important to recognize you can't be close to others without some risk. So someone put this to a cartoon. It's this quote to a cartoon. So this young lady is trying to express love and affection to this man, and he stabs her heart in a malicious way, stomps on it, and breaks her heart. She decides to put it in a casket, wrap it up. Her steely face, she's not going to let anyone hurt her again. But she notices that other people are connecting, some romantic, some friends, some other kinds of connections. This gentleman, check out his heart. He's been there, he's done that. He comes to try to get to know her. She's tough at first, then she wonders a little. He asks about the casket. She says, not a chance. She's terrified. Most angry behavior is just fear in costume. And then he decides to leave. This is my favorite scene because this is where risk comes in. She decides to throw the key. It's a risk. He's not dishonest. He takes out her heart. He's a little aghast. But he works on it with vigor. And now these two broken-hearted but mended-hearted people spend some time together. And then as they get close, it gets scary. She's off balance. She doesn't know what to do. This is new territory. She's frightened. But to love at all is to be vulnerable, and it's worth the risk. We have to be courageous. I just spent 5 years working in a young single adult situation in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I've seen a lot of wounded hearts and people who are no longer interested or willing in risking. And I can, with love, try to encourage you tonight that it's worth the risk. Okay, we're going to talk about some research now. I will try to be quick and entertaining, because I know some of you have already tuned out as soon as I said the R word. Our brains and bodies are actually created for connection. This is not a religious statement. This is a scientific statement. I'll give you a couple examples. James Cone, who was originally a psychologist and then became a neurologist. Well, he's not a doctor, so he's a neuropsychologist. And he has done some research on what happens in the brain in times of connection. So there are some threat centers in the brain, some fear centers. And when they light up, our body responds with cortisol and other stress hormones. It's hard on the body, but when you're trying to run from the saber-toothed tiger, being hard on the body isn't the concern. Outrunning the tiger is the concern. So the body pumps itself up so it can do that. He had a little experiment he did where someone was in an MRI tube, and there was a little red X, and they flashed the red X. And if you flash red X, I think it was a 30% chance that your heel would get shocked. Now, you were getting paid to do this, so people volunteered. And when the red X flashed, 9 threat or fear centers in the brain lit up. Then they had a second condition where you held the hand of a lab assistant you'd never met. The same experiment you went through, 5 fear centers, threat centers lit up in the brain. Then on the last condition, they had people hold the hand of a partner who they had previously rated as a secure attachment, and only 1 threat center in the brain. Connection is the state of rest for the body. Disconnection is stressful. We were made to connect. Let me talk to you a little bit about oxytocin and dopamine. Oxytocin and dopamine are both classified as neurotransmitters, but people also talk about oxytocin as a hormone. And they have different purposes, but when they crosstalk, you'll see how attachment comes into play. So the key for dopamine is it is a center, it's the reward and actually motivation center of the brain. There's something I want, it's important to me, it motivates me to accomplish that. Oxytocin is what we call the cuddle hormone, some people call it. It actually plays a key role in connection and safety. It's released at times of great physical proximity, like breastfeeding or a hug. It's also released during orgasm. It's a connector. They have some really interesting studies about what people will do when they're given a dose of a nasal spray of oxytocin, and their actual physical distance, their comfort level, their bubble, decreases between people with extra oxytocin. So think about this. When dopamine, the reward and drive and purposeful part of the brain, is going after something that's highly rewarding, like connection, and they crosstalk, thus you see the drive for people to connect in romantic relationships. It's what they're hardwired to do. For me, there's more than an evolution-based survival need. That's how it's talked about in science. I see it more as a divine creation issue. Okay, just a couple other research slides that I summarized for you. Isn't that nice of me? There's a good book by McLenser and Shaver, which is Attachment in Adulthood. And there were over 1,000 studies, over 1,000 published and reviewed studies in this one chapter that shows that insecure attachment style is linked with mental health in the following ways. When you feel insecure in your relationships, you're more likely to be depressed, anxious, report OCD, eating disorders. You see the rest there. Most of these studies are cross-sectional, but there are some longitudinal studies, and there are some studies with some nice controls. So insecure attachment predicts obsessive compulsive disorder, even when controlling for anxiety and depression. One of the most interesting lines of study now is that people who report high security and attachment have better outcomes when dealing with trauma. Because, as Sue said, when they're facing the dragon, they're not facing it alone. We could talk a lot about some other studies, more than 250 studies that linked attachment security to the following: higher levels of intimacy, communication, satisfaction, commitment, stability, conflict management, and less violence. We did a study that looked at how insecure attachment, and particularly in attachment behaviors, may predict relational aggression and then physical violence, and both of those were true. So we'll talk a little bit about one line of research, okay? A style or an internal working model is how you make, and I didn't even review all the literature between insecure attachment style and physical health problems. There's hundreds of articles there too. But I want you to think back to that 2x2 chart. If my experience with someone in my life is consistently that they're not trustworthy, I may learn to avoid them. That becomes an internal working model. When I'm around that person, I choose and decide what to do based upon previous experience. That's a style. Most of the research is based on styles. But behaviors, which we've been researching, is actually focused on what I'm doing in the relationship that promotes attachment or promotes security or insecurity. And so Dean Busby has done this with many people. I'm just one. But when I first moved here, he said, let's work on some research together. He does this in a very skilled way. He says, what are you interested in? And we started looking at the ways attachment is measured in couples, and most of it wasn't partner specific. It was really, the questions were really saying, based upon your life experience of people treating you a certain way, do you feel that this relationship is trustworthy? So there was an assumption that you couldn't change your attachment style for a long time. Research has now disproven that you can come from a very insecurely attached childhood and develop a secure attachment in adulthood. That's good news for those of you that have had rough childhoods. So we sat down, we worked on this measure for a while, and with the support of Sue Johnson and one of our Dean's doctoral student, Kitaro, and thanks to the RELATE data, which thousands of people on campus could say, thanks to the RELATE data, who did their thesis or something else out of the RELATE data, we developed the following measure. So here are the questions. Very simple. So you would respond first for yourself, and then you respond second for your partner. So when it's a partner question, like it says at the end, it would be my partner is rarely available to me. Those are the questions. People like it because it's short, it makes sense. It's about what's going on in this relationship right now. And after a couple pilots, we ran a larger data set from RELATE, and then we did a clinical study as well. And in these samples, the attachment behaviors measure, which we developed, which is just brief accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement scale. Held up all the ways it needs to statistically, and it was quite a strong predictor. That was in 2012. Since then, there have been 30 studies completed using the BEAR, with over 54 authors and 28 students and 13 theses dissertations, both in community and clinical settings. I've been very surprised. You just put at the bottom of an article, please contact us if you're interested in using it. And we have 7 universities using it. I was just contacted by a community and mental health center yesterday. And I'm not sure why it's so popular in Turkey, but like 3 different studies are being done with folks in Turkey. And then these are the translations so far, just in the last 6 years. So mostly that's because Dean knows how to create a good measure, but it speaks to things that people want to understand about their relationships. So I'm just going to review 4 studies very briefly that will use this data set that will be interesting. And then I'm going to talk with you, and you're going to participate about what they mean, okay? And so I'll say, this is the part where you participate, okay? So one of our master's students conducted a study with 1,033 married heterosexual couples from the RELATE data set. And I just want to say that these principles apply absolutely to couples in same-sex relationships. This need to be connected and to be loved is a universal need. But our data set was heterosexual. And we found that for every unit increase in poor attachment behavior, so the wife in the study rated herself lower on attachment, there was almost a 200% more likely a greater chance that she would have poor diet and low physical activity levels. Why would that happen? If a woman's reporting in a relationship that her attachment behaviors are low, meaning she doesn't feel that she's accessible, responsive, and engaged with her husband, why would she be more likely to eat crappy food and not exercise? What do you think?
She feels like crap.
Okay, she doesn't feel happy, she doesn't feel good, okay? What else? Think about, why would a lack of accessibility and responsiveness determine whether or not we get up and go to the gym? Yes?
You don't feel like you're worth it?
Yeah, maybe it's something about my value in this relationship, okay? And particularly if I'm saying, I don't feel like I can do those things for my spouse, I'm not a good spouse, perhaps. Okay, good answer. Okay, we're just gonna go through 4 of these. So that's interesting to think about. Second study. This is a community clinical sample, so people were coming to therapy, and we looked at relationship stability, relationship satisfaction, and their levels of communication. And we looked at cross-partner differences. This is another great idea that Dean had done with some previous colleagues. So I'll just use Sharon and myself as examples. So if we come into therapy and Sharon rates my bear on average as a 4, meaning 4 out of 5, I'm fairly accessible, responsive, and engaged. But I rate myself as a 5. I see myself as better than Sharon sees me, which never happens along those gender lines in a marriage. That's called self-enhancing. But if I rate myself as a 2 and she rates me as a 4, then that's self-deprecating. Okay? What do you think happens in couple relationships when one or both partners self-enhance? So it might look like this at home. Sharon might say to me, you know, I don't feel like you're there for me very much lately. And I say, sure I am. Look at all these good things I've done. What do you think happens over time to stability and satisfaction? If she's a pursuer, she'll turn up the volume on that complaint. And if I'm a withdrawer, then I will find ways to avoid that truth like the plague, right? Interestingly, this study had a mediating variable of communication, and what we found is that self-enhancing influenced satisfaction and stability through negative communication. Okay? And one of the things we've learned is we've done these studies now, these 30-some studies, lots of authors. Partner reports are more accurate than self-reports. Just so you know. It doesn't mean your partner always knows best, but sometimes in terms of attachment, their rating may be more accurate and more predictive. Okay? That was with Josh Novak. Here's an interesting one. Well, Lori Scatty, this was her doctoral dissertation. Research is always a team, by the way. And this study was on texting in couple relationships using a measure Sarah Coyne had developed. And these were all young adults in what they described as committed relationships. So ages 18 to 25. That wasn't meant to be funny. I'm just saying what they described it as. So some of these are going to be very obvious to you, but sometimes we need research to show what's really obvious is actually true. So interestingly, the male texting frequently, with frequency, just simply meant how often he texted, was negatively related with satisfaction and stability for both males and females. Meaning the more he texted her, the heterosexual relationships, the less stable they felt and the less satisfied they felt. Both partners. The more she texted, that was associated with her own sense of relationship stability and satisfaction. Let's pause there. I'm going to ask you about that. Why might his increased texting be bad for stability and satisfaction? Yes?
It gives her more to worry over.
It might give her more stress. Okay. That's a great explanation. I hadn't thought of that. Yes?
From my own experience, I don't communicate as well through text, and so I
Excellent.
don't feel satisfied doing it in text.
Most couples will report that we're not socialized as men to be effective communicators. We're not taught to explore our emotion. Then you throw texting in. I would say that this result is mostly about ineffective communication. Now, on the flip side, why is she more likely to report for herself relationship stability and satisfaction if she's texting a lot? Yeah.
So you can like think it out, think about what you actually want to say before you say it.
Yeah, I think it's an issue of perceived connection. I'm connecting and he's responding. I'm communicating and he's responding. Okay. Then if you text to just express affection, hey, I'm thinking about you, I love you, some cute emoji, right? That's associated with positive ARE, a positive accessibility, responsiveness, engagement for both partners. Because when I'm in the middle of the day just saying to you, I'm thinking about you, that says to Sharon, I'm both accessible and responsive. I'll give you a clinical story. I was working with a couple a long time ago, and they were both remarried and both had different narratives from their first marriage. The narrative from her first marriage was that he was unavailable, he didn't care, he left her abandoned, and then he actually died. And his narrative from his first marriage is that she was wonderfully stable and secure. And if I remember right, she didn't need a lot of reassuring. Well, you brought those two folks together, and they came in one time, and she was furious. He doesn't think about me, he doesn't reach out to me. The body language, separate sides of the couch, a lot of anger. In the first year of a remarriage is tough. You have to help them stabilize right up front. And then so it was just one of those bad sessions where they came bad and they left worse. And a kind of a last desperate ditch thing, I said to him, she really thinks that you don't think about her, that you're not important, she's not important to you. I have a hunch that you actually think about her all the time but never say anything about it. And he tried really hard to claim that that was true. So as they're leaving, I said, you better find some way to communicate 3 times a day that you're thinking about her. This is looking bad. They came back the next time, holding hands, happy. And I said, what happened? And he said, he just leaves me a little note. He texts me. So I guess what I was experiencing was the fear of, here we go again in this new marriage. But it's not like my old marriage, right? That's what happens when you reach out to show consistently, men to women, that I'm thinking about it. Okay? Now, this is interesting. Male texting to be hurtful. I'm not quite sure why they would do that, but one of the items was, I use texting to be hurtful. Predicted negatively all female variables. I don't think that we need to discuss that at length. But one variable we didn't use in the study, but we used in a poster was texting by either gender to apologize. Texting to apologize resulted in lower stability and lower satisfaction. Okay, now, what does this all mean? All of these relationships were mediated. Let me describe to you what mediation means. They were mediated by attachment behaviors, meaning, for example, and I'm having to work on 2 screens here to get my notes, sorry. And the mics are gonna go out, but otherwise. Mediation means what is the mechanism or the how something is transmitted or occurs between 2 variables. So in this case, for example, texting to express affection positively impacts relationship satisfaction and stability through attachment behaviors. Meaning when I text to express affection, I'm showing that I'm accessible and responsive and engaged, which predicts higher satisfaction. On the flip side, when I text to be hurtful, or in our previous study also, when I text to apologize, it makes me look less accessible, responsive, engaged, which is bad for relationship stability and satisfaction. It's interesting, on the Journal of Couple and Relationship Therapy website, this is the highest viewed article they have because it's about texting. Last one. Tasha Bates was one of our master's students, and we were looking at couples and health. Not surprisingly, when you're depressed, you have poor eating habits, less physical activity, you have less healthcare utilization, and it's true for yourself and for your partner, meaning that if I'm depressed, Sharon also is less likely to go to the doctor, so forth, so on. But the BEAR scores, meaning how they scored on accessibility, responsiveness, engagement, the higher your BEAR scores, the lower your total reported number of health problems. And BEAR mediated the relationship between depression and total health problems. What does that mean? Well, let me explain it to you this way. When female partners, some of the partner effects first. When female partners were depressed, male partners were less likely to be physically active and eat well. So when the female partner is depressed, why are men less likely to exercise and eat well? She doesn't feel like cooking. That could totally be true. What else? Yes? So this would be a wonderfully benevolent and hopeful explanation, is that he's trying to take care of her and he doesn't have any time to take care of himself, and I hope that's true. I think what we find clinically is that often the women in relationships are the spur or the prompts for healthy behavior. And when she's struggling with depression, that's not always a self-motivated behavior for men. Not always, but it can be in some relationships. Another partner effect. When female partner reports, when male partner is depressed, the female partner reports fewer health problems and she goes to the doctor less often. So when he's depressed, why does she report fewer health problems and go to the doctor less often? Yeah.
She feels needed?
Yeah, she feels needed. And she's probably taking care of him, right? If it's a traditional gender split in a relationship. Okay? I'm going to skip some of that, but Angela, for time's sake, Angela Bradford's done some really nice work on moderation and how the variables in the BEAR, the accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement, are moderators in important variables. I'll just summarize it this way. Accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement are positively related to relationship quality, couple communication, physical and mental health, self-esteem, and also negatively related to relational aggression and physical aggression. Meaning, the more securely I feel connected to Sharon, the less likely I am to be relationally aggressive and hurtful or physically violent. And then BEAR mediates or moderates all kinds of other variables. A couple that I think are interesting is that when one partner is a gamer and they spend a lot of time playing video games, the outcome that their partners report the most, is the most distressing, is a decrease in time together. It's not necessarily that I'm morally opposed to the game as it is that I feel neglected in the relationship. All right, so now I'm going to get you to the practical stuff because I know this is what a lot of people are here for. Okay, all of us, every one of us. I want you to be honest with yourself for a second. How good are you at being accessible to people? How good are you at being responsive when people reach out to you? If you're not very good at it, what are the roadblocks? What do you think are the primary roadblocks in today's society for me being responsive and engaged and accessible to Sharon? The phone. Let's talk about the phone. Okay? How does a phone and the time spent on it make you less responsive and accessible? What does that look like? Yes?
It's not just a phone anymore. It's I gotta check my emails. I've got something for work I have to text. Oh, I just saw this. I need to look at it. It's a huge distraction.
So here's a question I never saw in therapy when I started 25 years ago. Hey, therapist, can you help us? We're arguing about whether or not it's okay to have our phones in bed. Can you be a referee on that? This is something I'm asked somewhat regularly now. I had a gentleman, an older gentleman, I was in a meeting with this weekend who raised his kids a long time ago, and he said this very insightful thing. He said, I barely managed when I was a young father to start a business, to take care of my family, try to serve in the church and community. I never could have done that if I needed to reserve 3 to 5 hours a day for my phone. That was an impactful statement. The first time I started hearing about this in therapy is when I had a client say, I try to talk to her, but she's always on her Facebook. I said, what does that sound like? What does that look like? As it was a description, it was the same kind of language you hear with emotional affairs. So the greatest gift we can give each other in terms of our basic human needs is to look at someone when they're talking to you, pay attention to them, be empathetic, and give those faces that let somebody know you're thinking and listening and caring. But we're bad at that. We rarely make eye contact anymore. If you're not sure where you are with that and you're in a serious relationship, just go home and ask your partner. It'll go a little painfully at first, but then you can repair and reconnect. Just go home and say, which of the A, R, and E do I need to work on? And then do not protest. Do not go to the man or woman cave. Listen and say, through gritted teeth, I'll try to work on that. No one knows better about your level of accessibility, responsiveness, and engagement than your kids, your spouse, your family members, or maybe a roommate. Do you know what we're hearing a lot now from young single adults? Reflecting back on their earlier experiences is having disconnected parents because of the phones. Okay? And then particularly for you young single adults, what are you doing right now to practice being accessible, responsive? You need to practice. And you can do that by actually listening to someone and not multitask. Okay? So I wanted to show you a video clip, and this will probably be the last thing we have time for, that helps us look at this idea of repair. So this is a couple that has a moment of disconnect. So you'll watch them fight. One of the problems is we don't watch very good clips on fighting. And I have several that I use in class. If you want to watch them, there's a great scene in the video produced by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints called The Prodigal Son. And it's a husband and wife arguing after a dinner party. It's a great argument scene. There's a great scene in Rocky 3 on the beach with Adrian and Rocky arguing. There's a great scene in the movie Fireproof. Sometimes we need to learn how to fight effectively and then repair, okay? And so I'll show you that clip right now.
Now let's look at the exact same drama in an adult couple at a moment when emotional connection is lost.
We're going to be filming the session today so that you can watch it later, yeah? Okay, I'll be back in just a second.
I think this is going to be good.
Yeah.
I also think that we're gonna have fun at my sister's birthday on Saturday. I love when you and I do things together as a couple.
Yeah, look, I think we already talked about this, so I don't want to go. It's just not my thing, so I'm just gonna stay home and watch TV.
But you said you would. And this matters to me. It's important that we do things with my family. That we all be together. What is happening here? Are you gonna talk to me? Now you're putting up your wall, like you always do? Are you listening to me?
Look, I just don't see how your family reunion is my issue, okay?
Right.
Look, can we talk about it later? We'll talk about it later.
It seems like my feelings and what's important to me is never an issue with you. This matters to me, Ted. And you said you would come.
No, we can talk about it later. You don't have to get so upset.
This is where I feel like we're not even a couple. Like you don't care about my feelings. And we never talk about these things.
Okay, well, now you're just being critical. And that's not talking, you know? After this, I'm just gonna go back to work.
I feel like I'm all alone here. Where are you anyway?
Why do you have to make such... It's like a total emotional thing. It's not a big deal, okay?
Do I matter to you at all? You're mean.
No.
Mean and selfish. You don't care about anybody but yourself.
Well, why'd you marry me then?
Good question. Why did I? You don't care if I hurt. You're just not there for me.
When we feel cut off from our loved one, we go into a kind of panic. We have lost the connection that is our main source of safety and comfort.
The baby part of it again that we watched earlier. Now this is the effort to reconnect.
Okay, look, you're really upset, and it's not you, okay? It's not you. And you're right, when it comes to this topic, I shut right down. It's just your family is just so intimidating. And, you know, they're always asking questions about my career and how I'm doing and how we're doing. And it's a little much. I just block it out, okay? But it's not you, and you're really upset right now. And I don't want to see you upset. And I don't want you to think that I don't care about your feelings. So, when this thing is done, we'll get out of here and we'll talk some more, because you're right, we have to talk, okay? Okay, babe? All right. I'm sorry.
So when the withdrawer, which was clearly him, when the withdrawer makes attempts to reconnect, it's very calming neurologically for the pursuer. She got a little panicky in her pursuit because she felt like she was losing him. When he attempted to reconnect, there was repair. The myth that healthy couples don't have conflict is just that. I think it's confused with church teachings about the idea of contention is of the devil. There's difference between conflict and contention. Conflict is just two different opinions, and you better have those in marriage. But it's how you repair that is the issue. You do it quickly and it's permanent. You don't bring up the fight from 3 weeks ago and nail them over the head with it. That's called gunny sacking. You put all the problems in and then you hit them with it. Okay. So I would just end with this, and then I think we have a couple minutes for questions, or somebody tell me we don't. When I think about particularly my experience with students, what I experience students most want is real human connection with somebody else. And when we have experience like the civil rights trip, We have an experience like the Belize or Mexico City study abroad, when a student comes to talk about their future, and you can spend a few minutes actually listening to them, giving of yourself, being accessible and responsive. That's fuel. That's fuel for their dreams and their passion. It's so important that we fight to give each other that in a world of disconnect. The world of technology and social media is a world of disconnect and a world of anger and a world of hatred. Can I get an amen on that? Amen. Okay. So we have to agree to not buy into that and connect with each other in meaningful ways. And the principles we've talked about tonight apply with your roommates. They apply if you're a first-time parent. They apply if you're taking care of aging parents. These are the things that we want from each other, and these are the things that we feel so good when we can give to each other. Thank you. Laurel, are we done time-wise? Is that it? I can't see. Are we done time-wise? Where's the... Okay. Okay, question or two? Yes, right in the back.
I just had a question as far as accessibility in
Yes.
your relationship. So for example, in my marriage, I'm the stonewaller, and I shut off and I want to argue, and
Okay.
I'm obnoxious. But my husband, I can't reach him during the day, and then if I do reach him, it's like I'm super busy in the meeting, and and he's always busy, he's always busy.
Yeah.
His home is still busy. So
Yeah.
what kind of accessibility is it? Is it just functional?
Well, the problem is we've created worlds where we're legitimately busy, and they go against the principles of healthy relationships. So every one of us in a marital relationship has to find ways to be emotionally accessible to our partners on a daily basis. Now that will shift on your schedule if you're on Marine Reserves and you're gone on the week. I mean, life has its challenges, but yes, we have to find ways to be accessible or emotionally accessible to each other. Maybe one more? Yes?
What suggestions do you have to help young or emerging adults take the risk?
Yeah, okay, great question. So how do we help young single adults take the risk? We need to talk more positively, us old lame folks. We need to talk more positively about marriage. It starts there. We need to express more confidence in them. Jason Carroll, who's done some research on this, said that the biggest message of delay and you're not ready for relationships comes from parents. So we need to express confidence in people. So I'll just give you one little story and then we'll wrap up. So I was at a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints setting, and it was an institute meeting, and it was for return missionaries. So these folks had all just gotten home, had just returned home from a mission. And there were about 33 of them, and they were talking about dating. And I was in the back, supposedly observing. And somebody said, "What's the best advice you got on marriage and dating post-mission?" And someone raised their hand. And they were very sincere. And this is in Springville. The biggest thing that we need to do is make sure that we don't marry someone who's not a member of the church and can't take us to the temple. And they started talking about it for a while, and I finally jumped in and I said, "Do any of you know someone in Springville that's not a member of the church?" and nobody raised their hand. And I said, "Let's talk about the real issue that you're going to come home, not date, get discouraged, and begin to hate the opposite sex." So we spent 20 minutes talking about that, and what we came to the conclusion is you have to revive casual dating. Someone in our YSA stake defined casual dating as less than 2 hours, less than $10. And we set a kind of a joking rule that in our stake you couldn't think about whether someone was the right person for you until at least 10 dates. And they negotiated down to 7. That was as low as I went. So people are making decisions about whether they should marry someone before they've gone on the first date. And it's escalating. So they don't have casual dating, which is just to get to know people. So express confidence in marriage, demonstrate that. Express confidence in their ability to have successful relationships and help them understand what casual dating is. So thanks. We better wrap up because there's refreshments.